for joining this. We call this program is a graduate student monthly sustainability seminars. We have conducted this basically every month. Now this is the 9th seminars. I'm happy to introduce our speaker today. She's Celia. She's a student in the Maastricht University, Netherlands, and also she's an intern at CTSS, yeah, here in IPB. Celia will talk about introduction to sustainability in the waste management, the next crisis. I think this is very interesting topic. You know, it's about waste management. As we discussed earlier, now we face a huge problem of waste, yeah, including here in Jakarta and Bogor also, and most of the cities in Indonesia. So it will be very interesting for us to hear and to share experience and knowledge and discuss this in this meeting this afternoon. So I think I just hand over the time for Celia, and you can introduce more of yourself, Celia, to the participants. And before I give the time for Celia, I just want to ask all of the participants to mute your microphone during the presentation. And later on, you can ask questions. You can post questions either through the chat room, as well as you can also ask directly. I'm gonna look at the people who will ask question both directly and in the chat room. So I think I will just let Celia to present the material. So time is yours, Celia, please.
Yes, thank you so much for the introduction, Professor Rilus. So here now I want to, I'm going to share my screen. And yes, so my turn, I want to welcome you to this 9th GSMS. And so I will introduce the topic of sustainable waste management, the potential next crisis of Indonesia. And here I want to focus maybe a bit more our topic around the question, can a circular economy make trash obsolete? So before starting, I want to introduce a bit of myself. So my name is Wang Celia, and I'm actually, my parents are both Chinese, but I'm from Belgium. So I'm really interested in this multiculturality that there is, and that is why I've studied in Maastricht University. I'm in my 3rd and last year in economic and business economics in the specialization of emerging markets. So that is why I have decided to, I took an internship in Indonesia through MSM and IPB and CTSS. I also have a minor in law, and since everything is interconnected, I think that it's really interesting to also mix with psychology, politics, and international relations. And this is my contact. If you have any other question, I'm always available. But so yes, given the COVID-19 restriction, it has not been manageable for me to travel to Indonesia, but I've done a lot of research before starting the internship, and I was just thinking about these amazing sceneries and views that we have. I think that everyone knows the beautiful beaches that there is in Bali and Indonesia. We think about maybe scuba diving and the marine sea life that is really rich in Indonesia. We think about the cultural sites and all of this diversity that there is. But also, I think that I really wanted to try the food, the local food.
Satay.
Yes, exactly. I think that is one of the national dish. And so I also really wanted to try that. But I think a couple months into the internship, there was also another side of Indonesia that is not always talked about. And I think those kind of images have been surfacing on social media. So we've seen a lot of those trash that is happening in beaches on Bali. Or even I've learned that even though there is a waste issue, Indonesia still import waste from other developed countries. And this ends up in landfills like such, so in big 15 stores mountain of trash. So that got me really interested, and that's why I went into the topic of waste management in Indonesia. So for today's agenda, just really quickly, we wanted to do an introductory quiz to get a bit more of your knowledge. And then I will talk about the current waste management system that is happening in Indonesia. What does it mean, sustainability in the waste management? How can we see it from a transdisciplinary approach, of course, really relevant to CTSS, and then look at how a circular economy will play a role in the future of paradigm of sustainability when it comes to waste management. So, so I think this really, there is a poll option in Zoom, but we had some technical issue. So I think that here I will just ask you to answer via the chat and just say yes, no, or maybe ABC or yes, no, I don't know. Just quickly answer in the chat, and I will give maybe 20 seconds for everyone to answer. So it's only basically 5 more or less questions. So do you think waste is an issue overall globally? And then you can just answer in the chat, yes, no, I don't know, maybe. I will try to have it in front of me. So I think that right now I see that most of you said yes, which is a good sign. And then a couple of other facts. So in 2019, what was the estimated global waste management market size? So overall in the world, what was the economic output? So you have 500 billion, 1,000 billion, or 2,000 billion. And here you can once again put it.
Ooh. Wow.
So I've seen A, C.
I have no ideas, Celia.
You can just also pick one, I think.
Okay, just pick one.
Just pick one, yes. So
I pick B.
Mm-hmm. Okay, really interesting. It's really diverse, but actually, so it's 2,000 billion, and that is actually really a lot. Compare, I think, the automotive industry, it's only 5 billion around that, the global automotive, but that is because global waste is, everyone makes waste, every country, and you need to really manage it from the liquid to solid to gas waste. So all of those needs to be recycled, transported. And so it is actually a really, really big market that is most of the time undervalued. So next one, how much waste is approximately generated each day in Indonesia? So 50,000, 100,000, or 200,000? So I see B, 100,000, 200,000. Okay. Yes. Actually, so it is 200,000. That is, for me, at least to me, it was really surprising. I think that you just pick maybe the highest amount, but if you compare it in kilograms, you have to add 3 zeros. So that is really a lot each day. And per year, I think it goes up to 10 millions, if I recall correctly. But so this is really, really high. What is the biggest type of waste produced in Indonesia? What do you think? So we have plastic, organic waste, paper, or maybe all the others? So, okay, that is also really, really interesting. I think that most of you picked up plastic. So this is a big issue, but actually the biggest type of waste is organic waste. And we will talk about it later why, but we always talk about the issue of plastic and not organic waste. But we will go after that over it. And what percentage of waste is recycled in Indonesia? What do you think? So we have 7, 15, 25, or 40%. So Professor Dami has said B, 15%, A, a lot of 7%. Okay, actually, yes, it is A. I've seen a lot, so it's only 7%. This is really, really low. Because compared to here in Belgium, I know this is around 65%. One of the highest is Germany, which is around 70%. So we can see that 60 compared to 7% is really, really a big difference. And we will also explain why is it so low in Indonesia. And okay, so this is it for the question. Thank you for your participation. I hope that it at least line up a bit your interest into the topics. And so before starting, let's look at some facts of Indonesia that you might or might not know. So first of all, Indonesia is one of the largest archipelago in the world. So, and I think it's really rich in marine and species biodiversity. So you have a lot of endemic species, you have a lot of fishes, a lot of tropical forests. Yes, and it's also the third largest democracy. I can hear myself talking. Yeah, okay. And it's also the democracy myself. Yeah, okay. Hear myself, it's also the world with and it's also the fifth largest greenhouse gas emitter in the world. So because with great resources also comes great responsibilities, but Indonesia emits a lot of greenhouse gases, and it's also the second largest contributor to plastic in the ocean after China in the ocean. So this is a really big amount. So first, let's look at Indonesia environmental situation. So when you think about greenhouse gases, most of the time you think about the energy we produce. So everything from coal or oil that is used for energy. And we also think about, for example, agriculture. I think that palm oil of the world use of palm oil industry, and then also you have industrial process. But one that is really not that much cover is waste. And when looking at this graph, the orange part is as big as agriculture and industrial processes together combined. So this is why I think it's a topic that should be covered more often and more mediatized in just social media or in the medias. And then I looked a bit further into it. And so what actually happens to your waste when you throw it? In Indonesia, what happens is that 66% of the time, so 2/3 of the times, it just ends up in landfills. So in open field dumpings, and you just have mountains of trash. But what is also striking is that 20% of the waste is not even managed. So what happens? It ends up in the streets, in the nature, or in waterways, in the ocean, in the rivers. And then, as we've seen, less than 10% is actually either composted or recycled. And I wanted it to have a benchmark, so I compared it with Germany. I think we have some German in the room, and maybe they can give us their experience with waste. But in Germany, almost 70% is recycled. So we've compared it with Indonesia, it's really high. We see the recovery rate increasing and the disposal decreasing. So this is really what we want. And they also have other ways such as energy recovery. And I think that was in 2017, but they really use now less and less landfill area. And we will also see the difference between landfills in Indonesia and Germany because there are different types of landfills. So what is waste management actually? So first, it's all the practices from generation of the waste, or who and how is waste generated, which sectors generate the most, which activity, depending on your economy and GDP. Then comes the segregation. So what types of waste do you have and how do you sort it? And then whenever it's segregated, you have to, of course, collect it from the point of view. So most of the time in your work area or household, then transfer it to the disposal or the end of the process, which is the disposal. And there you either recycle or you have to do something about the waste or deposit or transform it. And so in the next couple of slides, I will just explain what actually happens, what happens in general and also specifically in the Indonesian context. So first, waste is generated, and like many of developing countries, who is the biggest actors is the household. So here we can see that it's mostly 42% are coming from household. And I think with COVID-19, it has been even increasing since the commercial areas and markets have been closing. Household accounted for a bigger and bigger portion of the waste generated. Then what are the types of waste that is actually created? you have the 6 common type of waste that you have every day. So paper, plastic, organic, glass, metal, and also a growing e-waste right now with all the technological breakthrough that we have. But within each of those types, there are also subcategories. For example, did you know that plastic has 7 types of plastic, and you have to take care of them separately? Also with glass, for example, you have to differentiate the color. But once again, with COVID-19, we have seen an increase in, for example, mask and protective equipment and medical uses. And this need even more specific treatment because it can be harmful if you just throw it in landfills. It was really surprising to learn that in Indonesia, they either don't segregate it at all, or they only do it from organic and non-organic way. Because in, for example, in Europe, you have mandatory segregation of 7 types of waste. So you have either paper, plastic, metal, and you have to segregate, and then they come and collect the waste. So this is already a first issue, I think, in Indonesia, the segregation of the waste. And so let's look at the composition. Most of the waste, I think that was surprising for a lot of you, but most of the waste is organic waste. And then a growing percentage of plastic, because now it's widely also used. But still, of course, it's going to be organic, because we've talked about it with one of the CTSS fellow, Pawarin, and he mentioned that from a broccoli, for example, when you have it, you only eat the florets, so the upper part, and then half of the other broccoli, you just throw it away in the garbage. So that's why there's a really big amount of volume of organic waste, and that is quite significant. So, and then whenever it's segregated, we have the collection points. And so this is typical in, I think, Indonesia, also Jakarta. And so it's either in only one space and everything is mixed, or you just do it by organic and inorganic, and then neighboring association come and pick it up. That is true if you live in a big city such as Jakarta or in Bogor, and where we see that the collection rate is 70%. But the further you go away from the cities, and the less collection there is. For example, in medium cities, it's only 40%, and in rural areas, it can be as low as 5%. So it's not at all collected, and it just ends up once again in the streets. Another collection points that is also really specific in Indonesia are those so-called waste banks. So this is where you will bring your trash. It started actually in 2008, backed by the local governments and some private actors, namely Unilever. And I think they have been really pivotal actors in the change to educate and change the behavior of people to think trash as not something that is wasteful, but something that could be used as a resources. So nowadays, I think there are more than 8,000 waste banks across Indonesia. And they have been quite important, but also some people criticize them because it's not as efficient, and they are quite lenient in their work. For example, they only open 2 to 4 times a week, a month, for example, so only on Sundays. And then they should have maybe a bigger important role, but that is also another debate. And last collection point, which is actually the most important one, is the informal sectors. So this is the Bantar Gebang landfill in Bekasi, just a bit outside Jakarta. And I've read an article from the New York Post, and I was really surprised to see that. So this is really high. It's maybe 15 stores high, and it welcomes more than 7,000 tons of waste per day. So that is a lot. And official numbers said that there are around 6,000 residents around this landfill, but local people said that it might go up to 20,000 people living here and working there 24/7, trying to pick up the trash and collect it so they can sell it and learn and earn a living out of the income that they sell from the trash. And this has led to a recycling rate between 3 to 7%. So almost all the recycling that is happening in Indonesia comes from actually the informal sectors. So this is also, I think, really interesting, but it has been really dangerous. It's a really dangerous work for them. There has been, for example, this landslide of waste that killed more than 100 people a couple of years ago. So, and even with COVID-19 right now, it's really dangerous for them to work. Yes, and so those are the three main collection points in Indonesia. And then after it's collected, it has to be disposed. We have seen landfills, which is the most prominent way to dispose of your waste in Indonesia, because it's the cheapest. You don't really need to think about it, and it's just short-term solution. But there are also, of course, a lot of issue coming out of it. And then incineration is also, I think, the second favorite way to do it. Not so much in Indonesia, but I think more in Europe. But it has been also criticized because you only burn the waste, and then you cannot back up the resources and the value that there is behind this. So there has been also a big debate about the environmental impact of incineration. Then comes composting, which is also really important because we've seen organic waste, and you have so many different ways to use composting. You have vermite composting, you have anaerobic digestion, you have homemade composting. So many different ways that could be really beneficial for the environment because you can put it back into agriculture. You have also waste to energy. So just how can you, for example, from landfills that are actually sanitary because there are different ways, you could back up biogas and energy to produce electricity and heating, for example. And also one of the best way is recycling, happens with plastic, glass, and metal. And you can, and so recycling and reuse the materials as if it was new. So this, of course, will be ideal. But right now, there are also a lot of new other ways that are coming up every day. So I've heard about the eco-enzyme, which turn organic waste into soap or into cleaning detergent. So that is really interesting. Also, chemical agent that will, for example, burn the plastic and turn it back into oil, and so you can reuse it. But on the other hand, there are also other ways to dispose it that are not so environmental friendly, such as illegal dumping, backyard burning, or just fill it up in the oceans, as we've talked about it. But okay, so overall, what happens to the waste? You know, consumers are most of the producer of waste. 25% is a big chunk is not managed, just thrown away. Otherwise, everything is either collected through private collection, informal one, or waste bank, but actually only less than 10% is recycled, and most of it ends up in landfill. So this is the broad picture of what is happening in Indonesia. And we know it's not sustainable. The government knows it's not sustainable because landfills are going over capacity really soon. They mentioned maybe in 2023, so it's coming up really soon. And what they've done is that they have set up a national target in 2025. So this is the waste estimated generation, and they want to reduce this by 30% in 2025, and they want to handle at least 70%, properly handle it by 2025. But what is happening right now, for example, in 2018, is that our actual waste reduction is only 2%. Compared to 18, so I think that there is still a big margin that needs to be corrected. So there's still a lot of work to do, but I think that we shouldn't be too pessimistic. And once again, I want to go back to Germany, maybe to set up a good example. I think in Germany right now, the waste management is rather self-evident. So people know they have to sort and they have to try to reduce their waste. But it hasn't been always the case, and it has been a long process to manage to shift this mentality. In the beginning of the 20th century, actually, there was also a threat of the landfills going over capacity. And it was causing a lot of diseases and health and environmental issues. So in 1972, they actually enacted the first law regarding waste management disposal. So at the end, what should we do with our waste? Then going along the years, they've seen in 1996 that it wasn't enough to only look at the disposal of the waste, but look at the whole management. So how do we generate the waste? How do we consume it? And how do we segregate it? And then they have enacted this new law. But once again, in 2012, they've noticed that this is not enough just to look at waste management, but really how can we have this new approach of circular economy? And then they have enacted this new law. And then in 2015 also, they have done this mandatory separation of waste at the source. So it has been a long process, but now looking in 2020, they are the world leader in recycling rate with almost 70%. So I think it gives us great hope that also Indonesian can do it. It took them more than 100 years, but we have capacity to leapfrog that and actually learn from their mistakes and go one step further. Just maybe quickly, how have they done it? They have actually laid down 5 fundamental steps and given with a priority. So the first step should be really prevention, reduction, and avoidance of waste, of course, and then trying to either recover it, recycle it, or at least try to gain energy out of it. But the last step, and what is really trying to be avoided, is to dispose of the waste in landfills, for example. A lot of people are also skeptical about this because they mentioned that, yeah, but with economic growth, it's normal that we have waste generated and it's part of the process. But I think Germany has also set the example that decoupling GDP, we can see a high GDP growth, a steady growth, can be done with a decrease of waste generation. So this is something that Germany has been able to do. And we can see that in many European countries, such as Germany, Austria, Finland, or Belgium, they have managed to have really low landfill and high recycling rate. So this is great prospect for Indonesia. So now let's go to the fun part. So what does sustainability mean in the waste management? I think we can reduce that to the 3 R's. We can summarize it with reduce, reuse, and recycle. So how can we reduce our use of natural resources, really try to minimize the waste creation? How can we reuse most of it? So having this system that is efficient and adaptive to our consumption, and try to have really this feedback loop. So we use it and then again, and recycle most of it. And this will lead to ultimately a circular economy that will lead waste that is generated from the resident goes back to them. And this should be done without jeopardizing the environment. So we have to lessen the impact of human activities while creating economic benefits, so income and jobs, while also trying to not harm the health of the people and improve the livelihood and the standards of living, specifically, I think, to the specifically to the informal sectors, for example, to the marginalized group that really are suffering most from our waste. But how can we reach this sustainability? I think that one of the way is transdisciplinary, and this is really at the core of what CTSS can do, since it's the name. And so what does it mean? It's I think really a fancy word to combine multidisciplinary, so having multiple disciplines work together to solve an issue, with interdisciplinary, where there are 2 disciplines and you interact them together to learn and grow from each other. So transdisciplinary is a combination of both. So you have all these multiple disciplines, and then you make them work together in order to solve a really complex issue. And this is what we want to do, especially in the waste management context, because it is really, really complex. Actually, the more you learn about it, the more you can see that it's a cross-sector issue, from agriculture, industries, commercial areas, in an energy system, to cross actors. So you have you really need a good collaboration between, for example, the communities and the household, the government, the private actors, and also academic researchers from, for example, universities. And in Indonesia, this is really important because you have so many different culture, ethnicities, and different languages that you really have to take into account religion, ethnicities, social norms, and the local wisdom. For example, in Bali, they see this approach of waste management from a view from us to the God. So I think that if you really want it to be sustainable, you have to take into account these cultural differences. And lastly, cross-discipline. This is, of course, you have to take into account natural and social sciences with philosophy and psychology, for example, and integrate it in a management and business view too. So this is one of the ways that will be needed in order to solve the waste management issue. So this is also another opinion. Maybe you can also quickly type into the chat. What do you think, in your opinion? There's no right or wrong. Which actor is responsible for waste management? So is it mostly the communities? Is it mostly the state? Or is it maybe the producer of the waste, the manufacturer? Which one do you think? Or maybe you just don't know? So I have producer, all of them, the state, and C. Okay, and I don't know. I think that this was a bit of a tricky question because yes, some said that it's all of them, and actually I will agree that it's actually a shared responsibility. So from my side, that was a bit tricky, and we can see that waste management has 3 different streams. So you have the upstream, which is really important. So the producer responsibility, which should be extended. So they call it EPR, and they have to really make a product durable and that it generates the least amount of waste possible. So how can they prevent and reduce this waste? Then in the middle stream, you have these individual responsibilities from the communities. How do you consume it? How do you segregate your waste? And how can you try to maybe reuse it as much as possible? And then you have the downstream, which is the state and the company responsibility, which is everything from the collection and the sound, environmental sound disposal of the end of life goods. How can we recycle, upcycle, and dispose it in a proper way? So, and I think that one of the issues that is relevant, that is really important to Indonesia, is the small island waste management. That is because Indonesia comprises, I think, more than 70,000 islands, and their challenge is exacerbated by that because they have a remote location. So this is really small, they have limited capacities, limited land availability, and this ends up in a lot of illegal dumping, landfills that are not sanitary at all, or just people that don't really care and will just do backyard burning, but without knowing the harmful consequences that there are behind that. And this is further true because most of those small islands rely on tourism, and the hospitality sectors accounts for 2 to 3 times more waste than if it was local people. And this is, in addition to that, I think this is further true because climate change and environment and energy are also issues in those small islands. So they have, for example, more floods or more disasters that maybe in main islands, and the economy rely a lot on tourism and external help. So it's really hard for them to have this sustainable waste management. The main challenges that are faced by the big islands are also faced in small islands, but those are just exacerbated. For example, institutional, so we all know that there is maybe a lack of leadership, regulatory framework, policies, regulation, and sound management and governance when it comes to waste management. But one that is more typical to smaller island is the land scarcity, which make them lack of capacities, infrastructure. They don't have the space to do this. And if they do, for example, landfill, those are most of the time poorly designed. So it's just an open dumping. And this is further true because money is always important when it comes to, for example, waste management and everything, I think. But financial, they have a big lack of funding because there is a low economic development, and waste management is really costly. If you want to have this technology and the knowledge how to do it, it can cost a lot. And the waste there isn't produced as much as, for example, in big islands. So there is, first of all, this low market value, but you also don't have the opportunity to have an economies of scale. If there was, even if there was a lot of waste, you cannot make it as profitable and viable enough. And the last point, I think, is education, which is always important. Those the population in those small islands lack, maybe are not as much educated as we wish they were. So there's not as much public awareness and participation. They lack this training and knowledge. And if they want to have this expertise and skill, they need to import it from the outside world. And also we have seen that they have their own way to deal with the trash. So they have this local knowledge that we need to really incorporate into the waste management in order for it to be really sustainable. So those are some of the issues, but then you would ask me, how do we solve it? And I think that one of the solution, one of the future paradigm of sustainability could be circular economy. And this topic has been talked about for a long time, and you might know already what it is about, but I will still elaborate it a bit because I think it's really interesting in the waste management, see how it goes in link. But before that, we have to look at how the economy right now is. So I think right now, most of our consumption is in a linear pattern. So we take, we make, we use, and then we discard. Obviously, this is not sustainable. And I think that there are two big issues at the extreme. So we take our resources as granted, and we think that those will be infinite. So we take oil, we do plastic, and we take coal, and we do mining without really thinking maybe in the longer term. And then at the end, everything that we produce is only discarded. So, and we have seen now with landfills that there are a lot of economic, social, and environmental issue with just discarding our waste. So what could we do? We could just maybe try to take this line, shorten it a bit, and make it round. And this is not crazy, I think, because this is what is happening right now with nature. We have producers that are consumed by living things, and then at the end of their life, they are decomposed and they go back into soil nutrients to reproduce, for example, producers and trees and so on. So ultimately, this is also what we would like to do. We have the materials, we make, we use, we recover, and then try to have again these materials. Of course, it just makes sense, right? It seems so obvious that we should do that. And when it comes to waste, I think we can distinguish two types of materials. So as we've said, the organic one, so really, I think, relevant to CTSS and the Agriculture University to have this, how do we grow our food? Then we, of course, need to process and package it. And then whenever it's done using, how can we maybe do this biological degradation so it can return back to nature and help us grow back our food? So this is a whole process that should really be looked into. And this holds the same for any human activities that we have. So gold, steel, plastic, e-waste. So this is just the same, but in a different types of materials. So let's go back maybe to our small island. We have seen that they have a lot of challenges, but maybe going more into a circular economy could have many different benefits. So we've talked about the environmental, they have a lot of challenges, and this will maybe mitigate the effects on climate change, and also economically, because then the nature will look prettier, and then you will still have more tourism. And at the same time, if you recycle your own waste, you can create jobs and income. So the economic viability is also behind the circular economy. And then at the social point of life, of course, you will improve their livelihoods, standard of life, and their health, and just, I think, overall benefits for human. And we have seen that agriculture and energy are two big issues in Indonesia. And I think when it comes to at least organic waste, the agriculture, it could solve, because when you have composting, you can have fertilizer and composter, and this can solve some issues such as soil degradation, and it could increase the crop production. But also in the energy side, because there is a need for Indonesia to shift to more renewable energies and shift from this coal and mining and oil use to have some more green energies. So there are many, many different benefits and opportunities that comes from the circular economy. And I want to also, because we're almost at the end, but I think it's really interesting to have some example in real life of what is happening. And here, Bali is also a really good example, because it's a really famous touristic attraction, but it's still quite big. Instead, let's look at the Gili Island, which are touristic islands at the west coast of Lombok. And so those are the Gili Island, and you have Gili Trawangan here. And it has been a touristic island for more than 15 years, where we have seen an increase from 10,000 tourists to 1 million tourists a year. So we have seen this big boom, and thus it creates more than 20 tons of waste per day. And that is a lot, because it's really small. You might not see it, but it's actually really small. And it has been an issue now for a lot of years. And what has happened there is that one community-based organization with an NGO has worked together and managed to pull up a multi-stakeholder partnership together. They have involved, for example, private firms, the community, also university, in order to try to solve the issue. And what they have done is, for example, they have increased the education and awareness of the people over there, especially among, for example, children. And then this has led to a financial support, because this of course is an issue, but with the Western tourism, and then also the willingness to pay of the local resident, because they know more about waste and they want to support the cause. So with the financial support and the awareness, they have managed to separate and segregate correctly the waste. And whenever these steps are done, collection is really easy, and they have reached almost 100% collection rate. And then when it is collected, they either send back to Lombok to recycle it, and they can sell it and make money out of it, or they even have decentralized recycling facilities on the island. So it creates jobs and economic opportunities, and they don't always need to import all of these materials from outside. So this is one of the way. Of course, there are still some issue on the island, but this is one of the way to try to already implement the circular economy on a tiny island. So yes, and but overall, I think that Indonesian have a lot of initiatives, and they are really resourceful. Especially, I think the youth. I've seen while doing my researches, I've came across so many youth organizations or youth NGOs that are trying to really tackle the issue of climate change. Some of them, so I've talked about the Waste Bank. It has been really famous, I think, all over the world, and Indonesia is known also for that. But also startups. For example, you have e-waste, which is a Uber Eats for waste. So they will come pick up your waste, for example, at your home, and trying to recycle it. So people don't always see it as difficult to sort your waste, and you have to bring it to the waste bank. Another that is really interesting is the food packaging. We know that this causes a lot of plastic, and this startup from a young Indonesian he started to do this packaging with seaweed, so you could actually eat the packaging or just throw it in the organic bin and recycle it. Also bye-bye plastic in Indonesia. And this, I think she started when she was 12 to learn about waste management and the issue of plastic. And they have done change to try, and they have even convinced the government to ban single-use plastic bags. So I thought that was really interesting to look into. But you have a lot of also NGOs. So COPAI, I think, is the youth collaboration for green climate. And then you have big players such as Greeneration and Waste for Change, which are all led by younger population. And you have also a lot, of course, of collaboration internationally with Japan, Denmark, and Netherlands that have really good success in waste management. So yes, and so I just wanted to give a bit of hope to see that it's not always just black, and that there's still a lot that is done in Indonesia, and that the problem can be solved, I think, if everyone try it. But then it comes to the end, and in conclusion, I think that this quote is really good. No waste is better than less waste. So the first step is to try to avoid and reduce our waste production. But this is going to take a long time. It's not going to happen overnight. And we need to look at the waste management approach from a short term. So trying to divert the waste to go into landfills. And then also in the longer term, how can we have this circular economy foundation? And I think we have really great opportunities that we can leapfrog and learn from more developed countries, because we can see Indonesian as a last mover. So we can learn from the trial and errors of other countries and directly be there at the circular economy. But this will need, for example, a strong regulatory framework, so a circular economy, supporting with strong management and governance that has strong regulation, policies, and incentives. This will, of course, requires effective collaboration between government, university, which will let place to the private firms, how should they react, and then also communities changing behavior. And last step, of course, is the new technology and innovation that needs to happen, and from the grassroots level, but also from the government and the firms. And I think that also one issue that is really important when we talk about waste management is data collection. How do we weight? What is the composition of waste is also really important. And so, of course, then the producer, how can we design and have this end of use stage? How can we have a whole new business model, and how can we change the behavior of the people? But yes, thank you so much. I think I've talked for enough, and thank you for your participation. I hope that you at least learned something new, and we can have now a discussion and question session.
Wow, I think I have to ask all of us give applause first. Very interesting presentation, Celia. Very interesting.
Thank you.
And it's really very important as well. Yeah. You touch so many things that is very interesting for us, you know. But I won't ask you a question because I think I let the participants ask questions for you. So participants, all of you can ask whether in English or in Bahasa Indonesia, but don't ask in the Dutch language, yeah, or Belgium language. I cannot translate. If you ask in Belgium language, then you can just ask directly to Celia. Oke, ada yang mau bertanya? Silakan, sangat menarik ya. Ini ternyata I just realized this is a transdisciplinary approach ya, Budami. I think Budami is also really wants to give some comments. I can see. Maybe you can start, Budami.
Okay, Rilus, thank you. Celia, that was a really great presentation. I really enjoyed that. I learned a lot too.
Thank you.
Okay, questions. Maybe not question, but more about some discussion. Well, first of all, did you do a comparison between islands when you have all this data, 7,000 tons per day or garbage? I mean, you did for all Indonesia. Did you also look at the different islands so we can see that maybe Java is, I don't know, 10 times Kalimantan. when the size of Java is actually only 1/4 or stuff like that? Did you do any comparison between islands?
Actually, not really, but I know some of those. For example, I know that Java Island is the biggest producer of waste because I think it accounts for 65% of the population in Indonesia. So it's not surprising that most of the waste come from Java Island, right? But I didn't do micro really comparison, but it just makes sense that Java Island is one of the big issues.
Yeah. Okay, that's my first question. Boleh dua ya, Pak ya?
Ya, boleh banget.
Can I ask? Okay. Okay, the second question is more related to the small island. Has there been any model in the world of sustainable small island garbage facility or whatever you call that? So because you mentioned Gili Trawangan, and it seems that they 100% recycle, Gili Trawangan. And well, of course, they're so famous, so they really have to take care of their cleanliness. But apart from Gili Trawangan, is there any other island in the world, or not island, but small island countries in the world that really is a good model that Indonesia can learn from?
So there are actually so many different. I think Gili Trawangan, they actually still have a lot of issue. They have managed to do 100% of collection. So at least that is really good, because whenever you collect the waste, at least you know where it is. But they haven't made 100% recycling. So that will mean zero waste island. But for example, I've just learned about this small island in Denmark, which is called Bornholm, and they are planning in 2032 to become actually zero waste. So they want to, and they even want to, and they want to do 100% recycling. So because in Europe, a lot of the waste is burned, so incinerated, so they can produce energy and electricity. So this is already a good way to recover at least some part of the waste, but we know that it's not circular. So we cannot bring back the resources, that the initial raw materials. And so they are planning on doing that. But of course, they are from Denmark, they have resources, they have more money, they can have support, they can have investment. So it's easier for them. But at least they will be the first mover. They will be the first one to try to do something like that, because going zero waste is really, really difficult. It means that everything is recycled. And so 2032 is one date that they have put. But closer to Indonesia, for example, we have Singapore. They have also managed to recycle a big part, but once again, they don't have landfills, because it's a really small island, Singapore. So they don't have a lot of space to do landfills, and they had to find another way. And what they did is incineration. But there has been a really big controversial debate, because maybe methane is decreased from landfills, but then CO2 from burning is also increasing. So we can see that the overall harmful effect on the environment is still there. And there is not yet 100% solution, but I think that with innovation and technological breakthrough, they're trying to look at how can this be done.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Celia. Thank you, Budami. I can see now there are 3 participants post question in the chat. So I think it's better I let you, Celia, read it by yourself, and then you respond. First is Mbak Raini Atumbol. You can read and then you can respond.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Or should I read? I think better you read, yeah?
Yeah, okay, yeah. So do you have any success story in which the community implement your programs on sustainable waste management? What strategy approach did you use in order to get the community to full participate? So personally, I haven't done any programs, I think, yet on sustainable waste management, but I know, for example, some Indonesian successful stories. I think that Surabaya is also quite doing okay with the work. They're trying to, because I think, yeah, a big issue is how can we increase public awareness and how can we change the behavioral mind, because most of Indonesian people see waste as something disgusting, filthy, it smells bad, I don't want to take care of it, but they don't see all the benefit behind it. And I think that one of the things they did is, for example, they incentivize the people to use gold. So instead of money, you could go into the waste bank, give your trash, and then they will give you some gold, and you can hold it as an investment to see if the value fluctuates. And this has led maybe people to be more like, okay, then I can have gold if I have waste. So imagine turning your waste into gold. That's something really really nice for the average people to have. And also maybe other initiative is that they have a lot of educational programs, especially, for example, for children, because it needs to start young to know what is waste, what happened with your waste, and change this whole mindset. But also another way is that, for example, instead of paying for your bus ticket, you could have bottles and you can exchange this bottle for money. So I think that is also really good. Then you don't have to pay for the bus, and it's environmental friendly to have this bus transportation, but also you recycle at the same time. So those are just small grassroots innovative solutions that people found to try to incentivize the population to recycle your waste.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Rainy, and thank you, Celia. And the next question is from Putri Oktariana from University Lampung University. Again, I just let you read and respond to her question.
Yes, thank you so much for your question. So I think that we know that there have been a lot of seminars and education of waste management, but I think the other problem is about public awareness, as we just talked about, of negative impact that caused by waste. In your opinion, what is your suggestion to increase public awareness of negative impacts that caused by waste? That is a really, really, I think, big question that I think if I knew the answer, I will already try to implement those all over Indonesia. But really, I think it plays a role a lot about culture. So for example, I know that a lot of Indonesian families, if your children say, I want to go into waste management, and the mother or the father will be like, no, waste is not good, waste is, it smells bad. So I think it's first of all changing this mindset and educating just people to say that, okay, waste, you can make money out of waste, and it's something that everyone has and that you need to actually solve it. So this is one of the first behavioral change that you need when it comes to public awareness. But it needs to go through, for example, NGOs, civil societies, but also government, because the people by themselves cannot just change this whole process because they are not educated enough, for example.
So it must be a massive campaign, yeah, public campaign, yeah, to increase awareness, I think, and I agree with you. I think public education and also government and NGOs play important roles, and even universities. I think students can also be actively participate, yeah, in campaigning the how to reduce the waste. Thank you, Celia. And there is another question from Muhammad Muhaimin. You can read short, but I think it's quite yeah, please.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Based on your experience, could you describe the flash SWOT analysis of Indonesian waste management, specifically, okay, in small island? So SWOT is strength, weaknesses, opportunity, and threat. I think that I've touched a bit upon it. So we've seen the challenges that we have in small islands, but also the benefits that could come out of it. So strength and weaknesses. So everything goes back to the 4 sectors that I've mentioned. So the institutional, the economic incentives, the social changes, the education, and all of those steps will really, all of those will really play a big role in the small island management, but they have a lot of opportunities and potential in order to increase this. But I will refer maybe going back to the slide, and if you want more information, I would be really happy to go over it all again. I know that I speak sometimes a bit fast, so maybe you have missed some information. But it's really basically about economic, environment, and social needs that needs to be improved.
Okay, thank you. And then the next person who asked question is from the same country as you. Is from John Paran. Yeah, so I think it's a good for you to read his question and then just respond. Please.
Okay, yes, perfect. So thank you for your question. So with the current sanitary situation, many people work from home and therefore more often use the computer. What are some tips that you can give to those people to limit their e-waste? Because e-waste is an increasing issue, especially in our era of technology. That is actually a really good question. I think that e-waste has been also a bit underestimated, and we know that to create, for example, a computer or a phone, it needs a lot of rare materials that is getting scarce, and the prices are increasing a lot, these commodities. And the first step, I think, comes from the producers. So Apple, all of those giants, they need to look at a way of how can they reuse their produce. And I think in China that is happening. Some villages, the whole economy is based on disassembling e-waste and trying to separate the different parts so they can reuse it and re-put it back into the economy. So this is the first step. And I think that also it comes from our individual responsibilities, of course, that whenever you have your phone, you shouldn't just change it every 2 years, or at least do it in a sustainable way. And maybe because a lot of, for example, Apple now, you can, I think when you buy a new phone, you can bring your old one, they will give you some money back and then they can reuse the parts. So this is also really good. And also another way is, I think, changing maybe, changing the mentality about it, and not always wanting to have ownership of everything. So for example, I know a good example of Philips. They are not selling light bulbs, but for example, they are licensing it to offices. So the offices are not really buying the light bulbs, but they are renting it out. And every time, for example, one is broken, Philips company will come, they will change it, and they will just bill you for the change, so they can reuse all of these different materials. And this should happen the same for the e-waste, I think.
Okay, thank you. So from your explanation, it seems that the producer also play very important role, yeah, in reducing this waste.
Yes, I think that they are actually one of the first steps that we need to look into, because me as a producer, I cannot change how they make the product. So they first have to look at how they design it and how they can make it as the least wasteful possible. So how can they reuse, repair, readapt each of the products? For example, when you go into the supermarket, do we need really all the time plastic packaging around your each vegetables? So you have 3 paprika and they are already in plastic packaging. Do we really need that? I'm not sure, but I think that this has to come from maybe above, because for me, I cannot change this, right?
Okay, so thank you very much. I cannot see any more question in the chat. Is there anybody who wants to ask question directly? We still have some time. If any participants want to ask directly a question to Celia, I give you time. Okay, not yet. Okay, I want to give a short comment, Celia. I think since this is really depend on the behavior of people, right? This waste is really produced by people, and how do we produce it and how we manage the waste is actually depend on the behavior of people. So I think we need sort of both sides, right? The individual responsibility, but as well as the structural approach, yeah, like rules, regulation, and all of this, we need to apply as well. So we cannot leave it really to the awareness of the individual alone, but it's really need individual as well as a structural approach. So I want to hear your comment about that.
Yes, I think exactly. I think that we need this big environment first to we need this regulatory framework, as I've mentioned. I think that the government leadership, transparency and accountability really plays a big role when it comes to environment and sustainability. Because, for example, I've talked about the Germany case, but so they have laid the ground rules, the basic regulation, and what should people try to follow to do at least the basic standards that everyone should follow. And then if you want to do more, of course, you are free to do it. But then this is and this has been really lacking, I think, in Indonesia. For example, I know that the President Joko Widodo and all of the other political party, because politics always play a role in everything, and maybe the political party, they have not as much incentive into going fully green, because, for example, the financing comes a lot from the energy companies that are really prominent in the country, such as mining, coal, oil, and so they don't want to lose their support. And so they have been a bit lacking. And when it comes to the waste management, there have been since 2006, I think, a lot of waste management law enacted. So they try to shift also the responsibilities to the communities and try to increase all of this. But one issue is, I think, also monitoring and enforcement, because basically legally you cannot burn your waste in your backyard. But what happens in reality is that everyone still does it because there is no enforcement. And so you won't come and get fined for it. For example, in Belgium here, if you have illegal dumping, so if you leave your trash in the middle of the street, there will maybe be a following after that. So police will come and try to look who did that. They have camera surveillance and try to see, okay, how can we find them, and then look after them. But in Indonesia, that has been lacking a lot. Another local example is that in the medical sectors, a lot of the, for example, syringes or for the pills or all of the masks, that they should sell it through a licensed company. But then a lot of informal and even mafia in the waste, they will come and try to buy the waste in order to sell it and make economic value out of this. And this is also, I think, really interesting to me, because there is no follow-up and backup from the government in trying to enforce those regulations and policies.
And it's interesting you touch on about the importance of, actually there is a power relation, play in this waste, as you mentioned, like big companies and so on, they have their own interests, and so we have to pay attention to contestation between the powers actually in managing this waste, right?
I'm sorry, can you repeat? I think that it has been lagging a bit.
Oh, I just mentioned that from your explanation, actually, we need also to pay attention to the power relations in dealing with this, because there are some power involved with interest in related to this waste, actually.
There is a lot of power, I think, power distance when it comes to even waste, because whenever there is economic value, and we know that waste can be really valuable, you have a lot of different actors that will try to fight for this. And for example, it was really interesting to look that there is actually that there is mafia in the waste management. So and they have strong power sometimes when they have sometimes when there is facilities, and they will say, okay, all the waste in here is mine, and then they will maybe try to use threat and violence in order to have the monopoly of the waste. So this is also something that we need to take into account. And also the informal sectors, for example, they are marginalized. They don't have as much power, but they are really important. And there have been a lot of example in many countries where they try to integrate the informal sectors, because they account for a big part of the recycling, and they are still really important. And I think that their living conditions are not really optimal. So this is also something that we could look into.
Okay, there is a thank you. There is a comment from Budami again in the chat. You can read and respond.
Any recommendation for CTSS? What should it focus on with respect to waste management? Yes, so this is, I think, a bit of my work that I'm doing right now in the internship. But with regard to CTSS and waste management, I think that the focus should be on organic waste. So we have seen that first, it's the biggest part of the waste type in Indonesia. So more than 50% all over, I think. And also, it's really relevant for CTSS because we are focusing on agriculture and see how can we maybe do this loop. So just from growing agriculture to how can we manage, how can we distribute well, because there's also a lot of food loss and food prevention that we should try to do. But then also at the end, when the waste is managed, I think that we have also the possibility to look at how is it, what technology should we use, what are the skills, how can we train those also, for example, in the management of that, and how can it go back into the agriculture and farmers. And this has been a big issue because composting, you can have fertilizers and you can have fertilizer and composting, and you can use those back into the agriculture sectors. And I think that also Professor Dami, she has, you are expert in entomology, and I think that vermicomposting is also becoming a big thing. So with the black soldier fly, and see maybe how can we make that big scale, how can we make it economically profitable, and how can we maybe, also a big issue is the market that there is. So how can we link the buyers and the sellers of this fertilizer? Can we have some basic standards when it comes to the quality of fertilizer, and work with the government, the farmers, and the private firms on how to do this whole process. So there's still a lot of work to do, and I think the organic should be one of our focus, because plastic waste, I mean, a lot of people are already trying to deal with it, but organic is a bit more tricky, and I think that IPB with CTSS has a way to be maybe in the front runner players.
Thank you, Celia. There is one comment from Pak Akbar Digdo in the chat. Maybe you can just, it is not question, but maybe you can just respond back to Pak Akbar.
So good point, using Gili Trawangan as an example to tackle waste problem. Tourism as a main driver with multi-stakeholder participation, I wish it can be replicated and lesson learned can be taken. Yes, I've actually learned about Gili Trawangan through one of the CTSS fellows, so Pa Warin, and I think it has been really interesting. Of course, the issue is not 100% solved, but there's a lot of good lessons that we can have. So how can we have this good collaborative framework to that all these different stakeholders work together, and we can see that when there is a shared common vision and goals, then it can actually lead to something, because there was this stakeholder engagement, there was transparency and accountability, and all of this together has led to really a better waste management. So it is a really good case, I think, that is shown, and it's really, really, really small, so they have managed to really do it, implement it well.
Okay, thank you very much, Celia. So if there is one more, maybe participants wants to ask question, I still give you opportunity. Otherwise, we will finish here. So one more, maybe. Anybody wants to ask directly to Celia? Okay, it seems all of the questions already posed and answered by Celia. So as a moderator, I just want to say thank you. I don't want to make any conclusion or or sort of comment anymore because attention already to interesting discussion and also presentation, of course. So as a moderator, I just want to say thank you for Celia and also for everyone for your participation. We apologize for any things that is not comfortable for all of you. So I think it's a program, and also maybe closing statement from Celia before Bu Dami, please, if you have any closing statement.
Yes. So first of all, thank you for organizing this, and thank you so much for your participation. There are way more people than I expected. I really hope that you at least learn something about waste management and that you find it interesting and that maybe you will be the next innovator in the waste management. And I really hope that at least, I think the first step for everyone is just to look at your own waste consumption and how can you just improve it at your own level, and maybe also educate the people around you on how can we solve this big emerging crisis that is coming up in Indonesia. I hope you at least enjoyed it and feel also very free to contact me if there is any question that you have. Thank you.
So please, Bu Dami, and also to close this session, to this program.
Okay. Well, thank you so much to Celia for a great presentation. It's really an eye-opener, and also you have we can see that you've really done your homework. It is very comprehensive, and now I understand more about the waste management. And also, Pak Rilus, thank you so much for a great moderating the session. And Celia, especially I like the games that you're giving right in the first, and it's surprising that I think I only did 2 right, all the others are wrong. So that means I don't know anything about waste in Indonesia. Dan kepada semuanya terima kasih ya atas kehadirannya. It's really fun having you here. Dan semoga hari ini pengetahuan kita bertambah bersama dan bisa bersama-sama memikirkan juga ini tentang sustainability and waste management. Where are we heading as a archipelago country? So this is something that will be our homework, is our homework, and will still be our homework in the next 100 years or so. So let us think together about sustainability and waste management. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Celia. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Have a nice day.
Yeah, have a nice day to you too.